Part 2. The Guardian of the Treasure. Mr. Gregory, the minister of Parsbury, was going for his morning walk when he saw the postman arrive at the gate.
Ah, the post is early.
He said happily. The postman gave him a letter.
It has got a foreign stamp on it.
The postman said. The letter was from the servant of his friend, Mr. Somerton. This is what he read. Sir, the master is very sick. He won't get out of bed. He needs a friend and he asks you to help him. He will pay all your expenses. The letter gave the address of a guest house in the village of Steinfeld in Germany. You can imagine the surprise and the confusion of Mr. Gregory. His friend was in trouble. There was no time to lose. A few hours later, he was on a train to Europe. 2 days later, the minister arrived in Steinfeld. He took a carriage directly to the guest house. The servant was already waiting at the door. He took Mr. Gregory to see his master. The room was at the end of a long, dark, narrow corridor. It had a small door, and Mr. Gregory had to lower his head to go in. The room was in almost complete darkness. The only light came from a small opening in the curtains. Mr. Somerton was sitting in bed.
Is that you, my dear friend?
He cried out in the dark.
Thank you for coming so quickly.
Mr. Gregory came closer to the bed. He saw that his friend looked thin and pale. There were drops of sweat on his face, and his hands were shaking.
Gregory, I need you to help me.
He said.
I can't tell you everything, but tomorrow morning there is something you must do. Brown will tell you everything you need to know. There is something you must put back. I'm afraid something terrible will happen.
Mr. Gregory did exactly what Mr. Somerton asked. He went with Mr. Brown to the Abbey of Steinfeld and he followed his instructions. Then he returned to the guest house. The next day, Mr. Somerton said he was feeling better, and they decided to return to England. On the return journey, Mr. Gregory finally asked Mr. Somerton about the strange events at Steinfeld. His friend told him the story of the stained glass window in Lord Denby's chapel. He told him about the book and how he found the answer to the code.
Brown and I came immediately to Steinfeld.
He continued.
On the first day, we went to find the abbey. The book told me everything I needed to know.
Mr. Somerton described the abbey, the abbot's house, and how they found the courtyard with the well made of fine Italian marble.
I looked down to the bottom of the well, and to my surprise, each stone looked like a step. But what if it was a trick? And if I stood on the wrong step? Could it open a hole in the well, or could it be something worse? It didn't matter. We were well prepared. We returned that night. Brown brought a rope and some metal bars for climbing. He also had some candles and a lantern. I climbed down into the well with the rope tied around me. I looked at each step for a clue. At the 49th step, I reached the bottom. There was nothing there. I felt very unhappy. We couldn't travel all this way for nothing. We started to go back up the steps. At the 38th step, my boot hit the stone hard. A large piece of stone broke off. Brown was behind me now, holding the lantern. "It's a funny cross," he said. He was looking at the step. It looks like eyes. "That's it!" I cried. I took the lantern out of Brown's hand. 3 eyes went across and 4 eyes went down. I remembered the words of the 3rd scroll. On 1 stone there are 7 eyes. I hit the stone in the center of the cross and the stone moved. I took the stone out of the wall and put it on the step below. I lit a candle and looked into the hole. Very slowly, I put my arm into the hole until my fingers touched something. It was an old leather bag. I pulled the bag towards me.
Mr. Somerton stopped. He turned to his servant and asked for a drink. Finally, he was able to continue with his story.
I was terrified. The smell of the bag was terrible. It was the worst smell of mold I have ever smelled. I felt something cold press itself against my face. It wrapped itself tightly around my body. Its arms and legs were like tentacles around my neck. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't escape. I fell from the step into the well, but I still had the rope around me, and Brown was able to pull me up. Now, Brown will tell you his story.
Well, sir,
Said Brown.
the master was looking in the hole, and I was holding the lantern. I heard someone laughing like a madman at the top of the well. I ran up the steps, and I held the light to his face. He had a horrible old face. The skin hung from his bones. His mouth was open and laughing. I could see his rotten yellow teeth. Just at that moment, I heard the master cry. I don't know how I had the strength to pull him up with the rope.
After I returned to my room at night,
Said Mr. Somerton in a low voice.
he sent someone to watch me.
Do you mean Abbot Thomas?
Mr. Gregory asked.
I think the man Brown saw was the abbot, but I believe the stone has a guardian. In the night, I heard noises outside my door, and I knew there was someone watching me, because each time they came, there was the same smell of mold. I knew that the best thing to do was to return the stone to its place, and I needed someone I could trust. I am curious to know, did you see anything strange this morning?
The task was easy.
Said Mr. Gregory.
Brown and I put the stone back quite quickly. The things you left were still there. I didn't sleep well the night before. I felt someone watching me, too. I had the same feeling when I put the stone back. There was a statue on the edge of the well. When we left, I looked at the statue again. It was smiling. It had the face of a very ugly toad.